Today on StampTV, I'm going to show you a great way to use up your scraps and make an elegant card in the process. Let me show you the tools and products you need to make this card project. First, you're going to need some stamps, and I'm using stamps from the new Shabby Spring StampTV kit. There are stamps here from both stamp sets that come in the kit, the Warm Spring Wishes and the Spring Blessings. You're also going to need some scissors, and I'm using the Cutter Bee scissors. You're going to need some ink, and I'm using the Gina Designs charcoal brown ink. You'll also need some adhesive and some brads, and I'm using a couple of the brushed brads that come in the Shabby Spring kit, but you can use any brads you want. You can also substitute other things like buttons or eyelets for the brads. Because I'm using brads, I'm going to need some sort of piercing tool, and I'm using the Tim Holtz craft pick, along with a little piece of mouse pad that I've cut to use to puncture the pieces of paper on so I don't ruin my surface. I have a few of the vintage cuts here from both the Warm Spring Wishes and the Spring Blessings vintage cuts packs, and I'm using the ivory ones. For cardstock, I'm using cardstock that came in the StampTV kit. This is the Gina Designs Fresh Asparagus, along with a card base made of the Ivory cardstock. And then I have another little strip here that came off of another piece of a project. And I have a couple scraps from the Shabby Spring Pattern paper pack. And these scraps both measure, I have my score buddy here just to use as a measuring tool, they measure 1 3/4 inches each. So, and you can adjust that a little bit up or down depending on how big you want your panels to be. But that's a perfect size for what's left over from a piece of 6x6 pattern paper that I cut to use for a card front. Then I have one of the vintage cuts, the fancy borders. This is in Fresh Asparagus. Now, if you don't have the vintage cuts, that's okay. You can either hand trim the pieces, or you can, for the border, you can use either a paper punch or a die or something else that you have. You can also use ribbon in place of the fancy border if you want. But these fancy borders and vintage cuts are so much fun to play with that you have to try them at least once. All right, so to begin, I'm going to start with this little strip of cardstock I have, and this is just an inch long piece or an inch wide piece, and it measures 5 inches long. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the birthday blessings greeting using some charcoal brown. So I want to do that off to the side here a little bit. So excuse my head if it gets in the way. I want to make sure I lean right over it so I get it straight. Okay. So there's the birthday blessings greeting. You're going to love the charcoal brown ink if you haven't tried it. This ink is right in between brown and black. It's a little bit of a muted brown, more toward the black side, and it's a great neutral. If you're not sure if you want brown, you're not sure if you want black, it is the perfect neutral color. Okay, so I'm also going to stamp this bird image, and I'm going to do this one in the charcoal brown too. And again, I am going to have to lean over this, so if my head gets in the way, I apologize for that. But it's good if you can look straight down onto these cuts to stamp them. And that also goes for if you're using a silhouette or a Cricut or any kind of machine to cut pieces. It's always better to get a bird's eye view, and you'll get it right in the center. There are two other colors I forgot to tell you about. I'm going to be using the Fresh Asparagus and the Tomato Soup. Those were hiding off in the corner of my desk. But I'm going to use those to stamp some flowers and leaves. So I'm going to start with this larger leaf and this large leaf stamp. And I'm going to ink this up using the Fresh Asparagus. And I will stamp one there. And it's okay if you miss a little spot because they're all going to be layered together. So That's not a problem. I just didn't put enough pressure in that area. There we go. Okay, so now I have those stamped. Next, I'm going to stamp these two flowers using some of the tomato soup. Now, it's kind of good to get an idea of how the flowers are positioned. Now, one little hint I'll give you is when you get the vintage cuts, you're going to notice that there's some little charred areas on them. That gives them that shabby look, but it also is part of the process of cutting these. And if you see brown on the surface anywhere, it's the other side that you use to stamp. So the brown will never really be blotchy or show up on the good side. So if you're having trouble figuring out which way to turn it, that's a great way to figure it out. Just look for where the brown is and flip it over. So I'm going to stamp this one there. And I've got another flower here. I'll stamp that one there. Okay, so there are my two flowers. And then I'm going to stamp some of the smaller leaves. So once again, I'm going to grab that fresh asparagus ink and ink these up. There's one, and one more. Now you can also create really pretty collages of flowers directly onto your cardstock, but if you use the vintage cuts, it allows you to create some more dimension by popping areas up, and I'll show you that in just a second. So now my next step, now that I have all of my pieces stamped here, my next step is going to be to assemble this card. So I'm going to start with these two pieces of pattern paper. And I want to lay them out together just to make sure they fit first. So you're going to want to do that and make sure that they fit well. So those two pieces look great. So now I'm going to take this border and I'm going to attach it to this piece first. Actually, I'll attach it to this piece because this is going to go on top. And I want to do this first because I want to trim it down to match the same size as this before I apply it to the pattern papers. So I'm going to run some tape right across the back. And then I'm going to position that. It's a lot easier to do it if you turn it around. I'm going to position that on the back and make sure that it's even on both sides. So you can kind of look at that and see, is there the same amount sticking out on both sides? Does it kind of hit the pattern at the same spot? And as long as it's pretty close, that will work. So there is that border. And now, using my cutter bee scissors, I'm just going to trim away the excess, like that. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to apply these two pieces of pattern paper onto my fresh asparagus layer. And I'll do one at a time by positioning it so that all the borders look pretty well even, like that. And then I'll add the top one. And again, positioning that so all the borders look even. If you overlap a little bit, that's okay. So if you didn't cut them perfectly, that's just fine. Just make sure that they line up together from side to side, the top and the bottom border pieces, pattern paper strips. Okay, so now this is going to go on top of that whole thing. So if there's any unevenness, that's going to cover it all up. And I will apply that one next. A little piece got stuck there. Okay. And I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. Like that. There we go. Okay. So now this whole panel can go on top of my ivory card base. So I'll add that next. You can see how these little strips are coming together to make quite a pretty background. And I haven't had to take a new piece of pattern paper or cardstock out to make this background. I love that idea. All right, so now I'm going to add the bird next, and the bird is going to go just above that border. This branch is going to go just above that border, almost like he's sitting on top of that border. And the bird I'm going to apply directly onto the card. So that will go just about there, like that. So now, and even though I have him taped on his body, his little tail feathers give it more dimension because those are still loose. All right, now I'm going to add a couple brads here. I'm going to grab these two flowers and poke some holes in them. And then I'm going to add a brushed brad inside each one. Now this is where I said you can use a button, you could use a little rhinestone or a pearl if you had it, or if you have some glitter, you might just want to glitter up the centers, that's fine. You can do it any way you want, or you can leave them plain because they're really pretty plain. So if you don't want to add the extra bulk to your card for mailing, then don't bother adding the brads. All right, so now I have the brads there, and I'm going to start with this particular branch, and I'm going to do a little layout. So I'm going to apply these using some 1/4 inch pop dots. So I'll be raising these up, and I'm going to create a little layout, and then I'll pop dot them all on. So I'm going to put one branch there, and make sure that you layer the stem ends underneath each other so they actually look like they're growing. And then I'll place this flower about there. And then on this side, I'm going to have this one coming down. And you know what? I think I'm only going to use 3. And then this flower will go right on top. We'll hide my little mistake there. And that's how I'm going to lay them out. Now, rather than have you watch me pop dot all of these on, I did make a finished card, so I will show that to you. You can see it's the same exact thing, but they're already attached. So here is my finished card project with the brads and the pretty little flowers and everything all pop dotted into place. We all have those strips of paper and cardstock that we trim off for other projects. By putting a few of them together, you can create a beautiful shabby spring look in no time at all.